What is up, ladies and gents? It's your boy Jermaine Event, Main on MMA, and today we are checking out a video from ITP MMA. And this is about David Goggins, ladies and gents, the polarizing David Goggins in the MMA world. All right. I know, like, I was a fan of David Goggins since I heard the story and all the, you know, when you hear a story, how can you not be inspired by this man? But over the past few years, he's been working with MMA fighters, right? He's been working with mixed martial artists, and the results have not necessarily been good. I would say, honestly, I know of Tony Ferguson. So outside of Tony Ferguson, I would say this might be a little premature to make such a video, but he could be right, like spot on with this. All right, ITP MMA Live could be spot on with his prediction that this is where UFC careers go to die. Hopefully not careers, okay? Because, you know, your boy is from Milwaukee, and before this season, Damian Lillard was working out with David Goggins. And as I sit here on Wednesday, the day after my Bucks go down to the Indiana Pacers, I'm just saying I hope David Goggins is not where careers go to die, but maybe just Tony Ferguson's. But let's see. Let's see what ITP MMA Live has to say about this.
Alright, so Israel Adesanya just released a video where he revealed that he's now training with David Goggins, and I'm sorry, but can someone explain to me what qualifications David Goggins has to be training UFC fighters, much less cornering them
just
like he's also done in the past? If you've been paying attention recently, then you've probably noticed that a growing number of fighters have decided to partner up with Goggins, and I personally feel like it's a waste of time. When it comes to actually training professional UFC fighters, this dude is completely in over his head, and I worry that he might be doing more harm than he is good. Sure, he's a former Navy SEAL with incredible endurance, but let's be real here, a military resume and a bunch of ultramarathons under your belt does not at all translate into effective MMA coaching, even if just as a strength and conditioning coach. Personally, I think it's a little bit irresponsible for Goggins to continue this little vanity project of his, but at the same time, it's not his fault that these fighters are turning to him as some sort of career Viagra, and yeah, I'll be talking about all this and more throughout this video. Okay, first let's talk about the fighters who've made the decision to bring Goggins into their camps. Tony Ferguson is for sure the most infamous example. Late in 2023, Tony made it public that he teamed up with David Goggins in order for him to strengthen his conditioning and mental toughness ahead of his fight with Paddy Pimblett, which, as we know, have always been Ferguson's two biggest weaknesses as a fighter. Look, man, Tony's always had some questionable qualities to him as a competitor, but being mentally weak and having a suspect gas tank were never his problem, so the choice to reel in Goggins has always felt a little bit strange to me.
What did you make of David Goggins in there? With Ferguson, do you think that's a bit bizarre, or are you just like that's typical Tony Ferguson?
I think it's quite stupid. Know what I mean? If there's two things that Tony's never needed help with, it's his mental state, because he's one of the look at the armbar Charles had him in. Know what I mean? He didn't tap. That's another right there. And then look at his cardio. He's never had a problem with his cardio. So I don't understand why he done it. Know what I mean? He must be thinking that he's not where he was mentally.
Tony let Goggins drag him through one of the most unnecessary hell weeks known to man. All of this while Ferguson was already 39 years old, coming off of multiple beatings, and desperately needing to preserve what little was left of his career. Sure, it's cool that Ferguson's the only person that's ever finished Goggins' Hell Week program and all, but there's so much more to fighting than being in really good shape. Obviously, strength and conditioning is a crucial part of the sport, but the idea of Tony absolutely destroying his body just a few weeks before his fight seems really dumb, and it definitely makes me question Goggins' decision-making skills as a trainer.
David Goggins in his corner though. David Goggins ain't got shit on me. Know what I mean?
Yeah.
When I finish Tony, I'll go over to David and say, "Who's gonna carry the boat, son? Who's gonna carry them?" Because it's not fucking him, is it?
Like, at the end of the day, was this really the best allocation of time and energy for Tony at this stage in his career? And I understand that Tony is just as much to blame.
That's a dope-ass Paddy moment that I might have overlooked at the time, because I was hoping Tony won that one. But that was a dope ass
Here's
moment
Goggins,
from
but
Patty.
my point here is that I really doubt that David's training regimen holds any practical value to use as preparation for a UFC fight. And look, it's not just me saying this. Both active and retired fighters within the UFC have questioned how useful Goggins Hell Week is for a fighter like Tony. For example, Daniel Cormier had this to say:
he's going to be in shape, but I don't know that the fatigue of our cardio is going to be the issue. That's not what's wrong with Tony Ferguson.
Right.
It's not that he's not preparing himself right. It's just other things, other reasons are why he's losing. And I don't know if David Goggins is going to be able to change that. Because, dude, the weathering and the beatings that you take in that octagon can't be fixed just by mental approach and working harder in the gym. It just takes something a little bit more. And also I worry, Goggins he works so hard. He don't care how you feel, and he's going to make you work. I hope he doesn't beat Tony down and overtrain him.
Then Chael Sonnen added to the conversation when he said this:
I love how hard Tony is working, and good things come from hard work. There's no question, but there's nothing, not the stair stepper, not the throwing up, not the lunges, not the sprints on the track. There's nothing that you'll be doing in the octagon against Patty. And no matter how much you want to say it's cross-training or it helps, you might even be right. But I'm right too. That's not what the judges are going to be watching for. So if you've only got so much energy at an older age like Tony, you might want to spend it in jiu-jitsu. You might spend it in wrestling. You might want to spend it in sparring. Something that resembles what you'll be doing opposite Patty on December 16th. That's my only thought.
Goggins also trained Jessica Ai prior to her fight against Cynthia Calvillo in 2020. Much like Ferguson, instead of actually addressing her technical flaws and developing some damn defense, I guess she thought what she really needed was to get in really, really good shape. And somehow, even though she spent weeks getting in peak physical condition, Jessica still ended up missing weight for this fight, and she lost it by unanimous decision, which is fucking pathetic. Of course, it's not David's fault that Ai has always been a terrible fighter in general, but come on, all this talk about mental toughness and then not being able to step on the scale at the proper weight is crazy. Honestly, the only bit of success that David's had with training a UFC fighter is when he was a part of John Jones' camp for his fight with Cyril Gane. As you probably already guessed, Jones brought in Goggins to help build up mental resilience and to push him to the edge during workouts. Obviously, John went on to make easy work out of Cyril, thus this ends up being a good look for Goggins, but come on, man, this was always going to be the result of the fight regardless of whether or not he was involved with John's camp. And now that Israel Adesanya has signed on to his program, I am feeling an unmistakable sense of concern that more fighters are going to turn to Goggins' methods in order to try and revitalize their careers, and I am equally concerned that he is going to continue trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Sure, David's radical approach to physical fitness and mental toughness would benefit 99% of people on planet Earth, but when it comes to professional fighters, and I guess pro athletes in general, there's definitely such thing as overtraining. And I'm not gonna lie, I do wonder if Goggins' ego won't allow itself to admit that his extreme training methods aren't practical for UFC fighters. I mean, this is the same guy who is attached so much of his identity with his physical fitness routine, and he's constantly preaching about how pushing your body to its breaking point on a regular basis is the key to success. And I think therein lies the problem when it comes to Goggins as a UFC trainer. He doesn't really believe in the idea of training smarter, not harder. To him, having anything left in the tank after a training session is a sign of mental weakness, and all mental weakness needs to be eradicated from the body. But in reality, rest, recuperation, recovery are all pivotal aspects of the sport, and it's important for fighters to ensure that they walk into the ring in optimal condition both physically and mentally. Look, mental toughness is crucial, nobody here is denying that, but MMA isn't all about who can suffer the most. It's equal parts skill, strategy, adapting under pressure, and a ton of other stuff as well. Goggins' military-style training regimens might build endurance and mental strength, but the mentally stronger fighter doesn't necessarily win every fight. And yeah, I guess I'll say it, I do think it is a little bit arrogant of him to believe that his mental toughness program is a one-size-fits-all solution for people of all walks of life, including professional fighters. Goggins being able to say that he's a strength and conditioning mentor for UFC champions is a very good look for his brand, but in practice, I really question if he's actually doing right by those he works with. But at the same time, when John Jones, Tony Ferguson, and Israel Adesanya come to him and ask him to train them, what is he gonna say, no? I mean, to be honest, I feel like he probably should start saying no at this point, but come on, man, realistically, nobody in his shoes would turn down an opportunity to work with clientele like that. And with that being said, I guess my biggest question at this point is why are these fighters hiring David Goggins to put them through absolute hell at such a late stage in their careers? Like, I think I can understand it a little bit more if, say, I don't know, Chase Hooper or Raul Rosas Jr. worked with him for a camp or two, but why are these fighters that have so much mileage in the sport doing this to themselves? If you want me to be honest, when it comes to Tony, Israel, and Jessica Ai, I can't help but suspect that they sought out Goggins because they started to doubt themselves and if they still had it in them to keep pushing forward. John, on the other hand, is just a crazy person who I genuinely think wanted to get pushed to hell and back again by Goggins to see what it was like. But for the other three fighters that David's trained, none of them came to him as young, hungry prospects that were on the rise. All of them sought him out when their stocks were the lowest they've ever been, and I'm not gonna lie, in each of these cases, they all feel like an act of desperation from the fighters in hopes to jumpstart their dying careers. Because it's such a bizarre, out of left field decision to make. The chips are down on your career, and you decide to partner up with an ultra-marathon runner who has zero professional combat sports experience. I mean, maybe they all wanted to see if they still had the mental toughness to even continue fighting, and they figured that training with Goggins would be the best way to put their resilience to the test. So maybe the issue here isn't Goggins, maybe it's that desperate fighters will try anything when they run out of actual answers. And in that regard,
insane.
David Goggins is just the latest snake oil. And in the case of Tony and Israel, who've both been competing in martial arts since they were kids, and seeing as both their times as professional athletes are clearly coming to an end, I can see how anybody in their shoes would be willing to seek out the most extreme solutions to prolonging their careers instead of gracefully coming to terms with the fact that their times in the sun have passed. Obviously, Father Time is undefeated, but to Tony and Izzy, going through the psychopathic training methods of David Goggins is probably a small price to pay if it means they can turn the clocks back on their careers and get a taste of glory again. Whereas some fighters know when to gracefully retire, some fighters instead choose to take drastic measures to feel like they're that guy again, and for reasons I cannot explain, some fighters' drastic measures is David Goggins. Anyways, that's the video for today. Definitely let me know what you think about Goggins as a trainer. Do you think it makes any sense for him to be training fighters, or has this science experiment crashed and burned? As always, if you liked the video, then like the video, and if you haven't
shout out to ITP MMA Live, man. I felt more sad at the end of that than anything. Like, it's sad to see, like, as an Izzy fan, that, yeah, this is definitely pointing to the end of Izzy's career. I was never a Tony Ferguson guy, so it's cool that he should have retired long before he was working with David Goggins. Let's be real here. I didn't know that he worked with Jessica I. That's crazy. Man. But he did successfully work with John Jones. So how do you go against that? He was a part of that camp before John became heavyweight champion, 2-division champion. So you can't really argue with that. But I left that video feeling quite sad, ladies and gents. Hopefully things work out for Izzy. He's calling for a rematch with Sean Strickland, which I don't necessarily want to see that. But if it happens, it happens. Hopefully working with Goggins is a positive for that fight. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Head on over to ITP MMA Live. Give them a like. Let them know Mama sent you. And I appreciate you guys so much for being here. Once again, hit that like, hit that subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon. I'm more Francis Ngannou. I be the biggest problem out of any nigga I know. A little old school like some 45 vinyls. You niggas old duels, what that do to the wino? I do it the commercial way, pay without the splits.